Hey y'all, how's it going? I'm B1 Trash and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about how I made this render for Shipmaster's Condor 2 mech. Now, in order to show you how I did it, I'm not going to actually redo all the work for this. Instead, I'm going to use a different model. This is the Reverse Nova by Joan Guard, and I saw this pop into Mecabricks a couple weeks ago and thought it would make a pretty cool ship to render. So now I've finally got an excuse to do that, so let's jump into the workshop and get this ready to export from Blender. To get into the workshop, we can hit this editor button, which I've already done, so we don't have to wait for it to load. For this type of render, we're going to replace all of the Mecabricks materials with something new. The quickest way to do that, to replace all of this gray material with one material, is to just export all of the grays as one chunk, all of the purples as one chunk, and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, I'm going to come up to the selection tools, which is keyboard shortcut W, select that, select color, and now anything I click on, it's going to select everything of that color. I'm going to group it using this button over here, which is also keyboard shortcut J. And now everything that I've got is in this group. I'm going to go ahead and hide the group and I'm going to rename it light gray. And then I'm going to do that for every other color here. So W to select color, click this purple, J to group it, rename it, and then hide it. I'm going to go ahead and do this for all the colors, and I'll catch up with you on the backside. Okay, now I've gotten to the last three colors, and it's not really worth it for me to export these as three separate files. So what I'm going to do is put these all in one miscellaneous category. In order to select all these, I'm going to use the box select tool, which is keyboard shortcut B, or I can use this area box here. But if I grab this without doing anything different, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to select extra pieces that I didn't want to select. If you notice here, I've also got this trans blue group in here, and that's because that was already selected before. So anytime you're doing a box select or an area select, you want to make sure that you click off of the model, make sure nothing is selected, and then you can select. Otherwise, all it's going to do is add to the selection you had previously, and you don't want that here. So in order to fix this, I'm just going to drag this out of here, and then we'll rename this one to miscellaneous. All right, so now we can start exporting. I'm going to go ahead and use the Mecabricks export. So the Blender add-on ZMBX, this is the native Mecabricks export engine. We'll export that into our folder. I'll just call this Reverse Nova Miscellaneous. And I'll do this for all of my colors. I'll be right back. Okay, and with all of that exported, let's go ahead and jump into Blender. Now I've got the default general scene opened up here, and in the bottom left here, I've got screencast keys enabled so you can follow along with what I'm actually doing, which is especially helpful if I forget to tell you what I did. Okay, I'm going to hit A to select everything, X to delete it, and then click to confirm. I'm going to go to the top here to File, Import, and then down to Mecabricks to do an import. Now before I do that, we're going to do a lot of imports. So I'm going to add a keyboard shortcut by right-clicking and clicking on Assign Shortcut, and now I'm going to choose Control-Shift-I for my import. I'm going to uncheck Logo on Studs, and this is going to make less geometry so the computer can process things a little bit easier. I'm going to navigate to each of my files and import them. Now the good thing is, when Mecabricks exports everything, it remembers where it was in space. So even though we tore this apart, when we put it back together, it's going to end up right back where it was when we left off in Mecabricks. Okay, now to keep everything organized, I'm going to grab these collections, which are these little box icons, and I'm going to drag it up into this main collection and rename this to Ship. And I'm going to add another collection, right-click, New Collection, and I'm going to rename that to Scene Stuff. And this is where I like to keep things like cameras and lights. And speaking of lights, let's go ahead and add a light. Shift A will allow you to add anything. Come down here to Light, and I'll select a point light. I'm going to hit 7 on my numpad, and I'm going to hit G to grab, and I'm going to move it out here, out in front of the ship. Then I'm going to hit 1 to look at the front view, G to grab again, and move it vertically so that it's hanging out above the ship. Now to see what we're actually doing, I'm going to jump into the rendered view, which will allow us to see how the light's actually affecting the model. Now in this case, we actually have two different light situations going on. One, we have the light from our point light that we just added, and the other one is world lighting. I'm going to click on this tab, which is the world tab, and I'm going to take the strength of the world background and turn it all the way down to 0. So now the only thing affecting our object here is this light. Now when we added this light, it comes in really dim. It's 10 watts, and we're trying to illuminate an object that is several hundreds of meters large. So we're going to need a lot of power on this light. So I'm going to choose something like 500,000 watts. Okay. So we've got a light, and it's illuminating our object. But what we need to do now is take this light and this object and turn what we see into a Toon shader. Basically, everything that's black here, we want to be a darker shade of our color. And then everything that's kind of on this brighter side here, we want to see as highlights. So let's edit the material by, first we're going to grab this little border and drag it up to give ourselves some workspace down here. And change this from a timeline to a shader editor. We can click on any of our parts and it'll bring up the material for it. Now this is the default Mecabricks material, and this is fantastic for doing realistic renders. But we're trying to do a non-realistic Toon shader, so we don't need it. I'm going to hit X to get rid of it, and now it's going to turn everything white. I'm going to hit on this new button here to add a new material, and then I'm going to drag the output all the way over here to the right, because down here is where we're going to do all of our work. I'm going to start by adding, so Shift A to add, and then hit the S button. I'm going to add in a shader to RGB node, so just type it in, look for it on the list, bring it in. Now you can drag it on top of this noodle. Once this noodle turns white, when you drop it in, it'll automatically connect the node. We also need to add a color ramp. So Shift A, S to search, and then just type in ramp. Once you type ramp in, it'll be the first thing there. Drag it up, make the line white, and now we've got it put in. Now the color ramp is where all the magic happens for this. And because the Toon shader, we want to see hard lines, I'm going to change this gradient from linear to constant. And what that's going to allow us to see is as we drag this closer to the black, we're going to see areas that go white and black. Eventually we're going to want this to show color, but for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a couple of different colors here. I'm going to make them all gradients of gray, and we're going to use that information to change the value of a color later. So let's add in something here. I want to make this not fully white. Add in a new one, make that a little bit darker. Add in a new one, make that a little bit darker yet. And then on the last one here, we don't want it to be fully black, we still want it to be dark gray. Now the thing here is this is taking all the information from the shader and saying anything that's really dark, we want this to be not completely black. And that'll allow us to see the areas of color and still have a black outline around them. Now to take this and turn it into value information, we need to add a new node. So Shift A to add, and now up here in color, I'm going to grab this hue, saturation, and value. If I drop it on the line, it automatically plugs into color, but again, we said we want us to be value information. So I'll throw value up there, and then what I can do is click on one of these other purple pieces, scroll in so we can see, click on this little square, and change this to hex. When I changed it to hex, I've got a hex code. I can grab that and copy it, and then I can go back to my material, and I can paste it right into this little box right here. And now my color is the same color as the Mecabricks material. Now I think what I want is a dark shade, the actual color, and then 2 levels of highlights. So I want this bit here to be this color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over so it's next to it. And then this area here is this color here. So I'm going to click on this handle, and I'm going to adjust this down until I've got the correct color. I think that looks pretty good. This I want to be a little bit lighter. So I'll click on this handle until I grab it. And now I'm going to bring this down until I get that to the color I want it to be. I think that looks good. And now I can come in and adjust these two. I think I'll make both of them just a little bit lighter as well. And the final one. Okay. Now, next thing, this highlight here, I think I want that to be a little less saturated. So I'm going to duplicate my color ramp. I'm going to click on it and then hit Shift D to duplicate it, drag it up here, and then click to drop it. I'm going to pipe the color into the factor just like the other one was, and I'm going to plug the color from this into the saturation. Now as we can see right here, this area here is not saturated at all, and normally we want that to be a 1, and in this case 1 would be white. So what I can do here is click on this handle and change this to full white. Now this is going to be full white here. I'm going to erase this handle. I'm going to get rid of this handle here, and then I'm going to take this color and I'm going to drive this closer to white, which is going to make it more saturated. Now I'll just move this further away, match it up with the other one, and I've got the highlight that I want. Okay, so now I've got my basic shader done. So let's give it a name. We'll call it Toon Purple. And now we can start applying this to the rest of the model. Okay, so all of these pieces that have the same shape already have the material applied, but these other ones don't. So what we'll do is open up our ship and then find all the purple. Make sure that we've got one of these selected, right click, and we can come down here to select objects, which if we right click and hit the S key will automatically select everything for us. We need to make sure that whatever we are copying from is the active object. So we can see over here we have this more yellow outline around our part. That's good. If we've got one of these other parts selected, we'll be copying from the Mecabricks material over to everything else. So we'll select by holding down Shift, make sure we select just that part. We've got all of our purple selected, and now we'll hit Control L to bring up our link menu and come down to link our materials, which would be M. So Control L M is what's going to copy and paste everything over. Now before I go any further, let me go in and make some tweaks. This highlight area I think is way too big, so I'm going to bring that down and make our main area a little bit bigger. And then that's also going to require bringing this guy down as well. It's just on top of the highlight. Okay, Future Me here. Here's a problem I have where the saturation line is not matching up with the value line that I've got here. So I've kind of got this weird looking border. So what I'm going to do to fix that is instead of using my shader to RGB to drive this color ramp for saturation, I'm going to use my value color ramp to drive that value there. What that's going to do is it's going to make a clean separation. And another thing I can do now is I can actually ease this and I can make this transition a little bit more gradual. So I can bring this up to the left and I can affect the entire color range at once, but I can choose something that's going to look right for me. And I think that looks pretty good right there. And that gives a nice highlight color. So you're not going to see this till the end, but this is how I fix that. Okay, now that we've got that, I want to copy this to the other colors. So I'm going to click on one of these gray pieces and then click on the color like we did before, and I'm going to copy the color code from that. And then I'm going to change the material over to match our Toon. So if you click on this button up here, you can just start typing, and I typed in Toon to bring up our Toon Purple. Now I don't want to change all the purple pieces, so I'm going to make a copy of this and call this Toon Light Gray. And now we can edit that. So all I do is come up to my color, change the code, paste in what I got from the gray, and there we go. Now this one here looks like it's a little too dark, so what I'm going to do is adjust this color so that it matches over here. Now that I've got that, I can come back up here, find Toon Light Gray, select all of my objects, make sure that my seed object is selected in orange, and another way is you can see that the Toon Light Gray shader is down here. And then make sure that the mouse is in the main window, Control L and then M to copy the material over. Now all of my light gray parts have the same material. Let's start at the top. I click on one of the black pieces here. I'm going to come over, click in the color box, change the material, type in Toon, grab one of these, come up, make a new color, call it Toon Black, and paste in the code. Once I've done that, select all the objects, Control L, and link the materials. I'm going to do this for the rest of the materials here. Okay, I've got all of my main color blocks complete, but now I need to work on the miscellaneous section. So the easiest way to do that is to exclude the entire ship from the view layer and then come back down and click the checkbox just next to miscellaneous. Now I can easily grab just the pieces that I want. These red pieces I'm not going to bother with, but I do need to do the blue and brown pieces. So I'm going to do the same thing as before. Now this time I'm just going to manually select everything. Again, make sure our seed part is selected in orange. Control L and M to link the materials. Okay, lastly we have these little brown parts to do. And we've got the brown material complete. Now we just need to add it to all of the materials. Make sure our seed part selected, Control L and M. Whoop. Control L and M. And now everything should have a Toon shader that needs it. Again, these two pieces here, I can just delete those because we're not going to see them in the final render anyways. So let's toggle on the rest of our ship. Okay, the next thing I want to address is these trans blue pieces. Whenever I see these transparent pieces, I want to think of them as something that's glowing. So for a Toon shader, this just isn't going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the value of these to make them really bright. So all I'm going to do is click on my hue saturation value node, hit Shift D to duplicate it, and then drop it in right behind. Now I can run the value up to something high like 200. Now these look kind of like they're glowing, but the color is being controlled by the light and not by the parts themselves. So I'm going to use a different kind of node called a Fresnel node. So Mr. Fresnel was this old French guy that lived like 200 years ago, and he came up with the formula that explains, for instance, when you look down into a pond, you can see through the water, but as you look further out in the area, it reflects the sun. So now 200 years later, all we have to do is search for his name and pull it up, and we've got a node that's going to do exactly that. To take all the scientific mumbo jumbo down and simplify it into something that makes sense, the Fresnel node makes the edges of roundy things pop. Alright, so we're going to take this, we're going to pipe this into the value, which was happy sitting around 200. But this node puts out a value between 0 and 1. So to fix that, we're going to add a math node. So Shift A and search, type in math, bring up the math node, drop it in, and we're going to change this to multiply. Now we said the number we wanted to use before was 200. So boom, we've got 200 in there. And what you can see is around the edges here, it's brighter, and in the middle it's darker, and we want to reverse that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add in a color ramp, and like we did last time, we're going to change this to constant and drag this handle up until we can see a little bit of a change. Now ideally I want this black part here to be kind of like a white hot and then color around the edge. So I actually want this black handle to be on the inside and the white handle to be on the outside. And then, instead of this being pure black, we're going to multiply, this white color is 1 and this black is 0. So we're multiplying 200 by 1 to get 200 for these areas over here, and then over here, this bit here is being multiplied by 0. So we want that to be slightly higher. So we'll bring that up to somewhere around there. Okay, and then the easiest way to fix all of this is to go in and grab our color and drag that a little bit closer to white, bring this one all the way up, and play around until we've got a good mix of what we want. Alright, we can also adjust the index of refraction over here, make things bigger and smaller. But what we're trying to do is just add extra highlights in areas that there weren't any before. Maybe even bump this value up. Let's try 500. Alright, that looks pretty good there. And to emphasize the effect, I'm going to turn on bloom. So I'm going to go into my render settings, come down to, there it is, come down to bloom, check that on, and now we've got glowing lights. Now the only problem is this is way too bright, So I'm going to drag down the intensity, and I think that looks pretty good there. Okay, the next step is to adjust our lighting. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this down, select my point light, and I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, and then Shift Z is going to lock it on the Z axis. And now I can bring it over here. Just kind of move it around until I find a lighting look that I like. Maybe take this guy up here, click on him, and come into the lighting options and bring the power down to say 200,000. G, and then Shift Z again to make sure I'm only moving it in that direction. And I think I like the way that looks right there. Okay, next thing we want to do is add some outlines. To do that, we're going to do it with a grease pencil. So Shift A, grease pencil, and I'm going to add a blank one. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a new collection over here and stick my grease pencil in there. That way I can control this. I can turn it on, turn it off if I want. The big thing is the grease pencil with a line art modifier can really bog down the computer, and we want to be able to turn that off if we want to. And so we can use this little checkbox here which excludes from view layer, which will stop it doing all the computations as well. Okay, now with that we're going to take our grease pencil and go to the modifier tab, which is this wrench. We'll add in our line art modifier. Now what we want to draw the line art on is the entire model here. So down in collection, I'm going to scroll down to ship. Now this is going to apply this line art modifier to everything inside of this ship collection. For the layer, we'll just pick the first one, and for the material, the first one as well. Now we're not seeing anything right now, and that's because the line art modifier actually projects through a camera. So we need to add a camera to our scene. So I'll click on my scene stuff collection, Shift A, and come down here to camera, add that in. And the quickest way to get the camera to where you want it to be is hit Control-Alt-0, and that will bring the camera directly to the viewport of where you're looking. Now again, the grease pencil can bog down the computer while we're moving the camera around. So I'm going to want to toggle this off and then come over here and adjust our camera. Easy way to do that is pull out this little toolbar here. You can use N to turn it on and off. Then come down to View and do Camera to View. Now the camera will automatically lock to what we have in the view. So we can set this up to how we want it to look in our final render. And once we like that, we'll untoggle that, hit the N to close that, and we can turn our outlines back on. Come into the grease pencil modifier and take a look at that and see how it looks. Now right now these lines are very thin. It's very difficult to see them. But if we bring this number up to like say 250, we can start seeing the lines. Now the lines don't actually go all the way through. They're broken up in a lot of places. And the reason for that is how the Mecabricks models are actually imported. So when these are imported, let's tell you what, let's turn off the outlines and click on a piece here, tab into edit mode, and then we'll hit the / on the number pad to bring it into isolated view. If you look at the way this is here, I'm going to click away and then hover over this section here and hit L to grab everything that's connected together. If I grab G and move it, you can see that this face here is its own separate object. And if I grab another thing here, let's click away and L to grab that, everything is separate. And so that kind of wreaks a little bit of havoc on the line art. So what we're going to do here, let's put everything back together, is kind of glue the entire section together. So if I select everything here, hit M on my keyboard, this is going to merge everything, and I want to merge by distance. So M and then B for merge by distance. Now if I click away and then hover over top of it and hit L, L is going to grab everything that's connected. And now if I grab that, everything is pretty much connected together, with the exception of these pieces down here on the bottom that are extra pieces that really don't matter. So we can use this technique and glue everything together that we need to for the model. So let's tab out of edit mode, go back to the model, right click on ship, select all the objects, tab back in the edit mode, hit A just to make sure we've got everything selected, M for the merge, and then B by distance. And what you can see down here at the bottom is we've removed 15,000 vertices. So if you look down here, this is our total vertice count. I'm going to undo that. We started out with roughly 56,000 vertices. and then redoing that, we now have 41,000 vertices. So we've merged those, everything's together, and tab to get back into object mode up here. Come back to our outlines, turn those back on. And now all the lines connect. So that's pretty much it for the Toon shader itself. If you like having a black background, that's fine. If not, I'll show you a couple different ways that you can deal with that. I'm going to turn off my overlays, and this is going to give us a better idea of what the final rendered image is going to look like. Now, as far as the background goes, what do we want to do here? If you want to add a color, one way you can do that is click here on the World tab, and then bring the strength of this back up. And now we can go in and add a color. But as you can see, anything that we're doing over here with this color is also going to affect the model, and we don't want to do that because we already spent all that time adjusting the light the way we wanted to. Instead, the world has a material just like all the objects do. So we can go from object space to world space in our shader editor, and we have the same controls here that we do over in the settings panel on the side. But what I'm going to do is add in a different node, and this is called a light path node. So Shift A, you can search for light path, or it lives here in input, and add this. And this has a function called isCameraArray. So what this does is anything that's actually background that's going directly to the camera is going to come out as a 1, and everything else is going to come out as a 0. So if we plug this into the strength of the background, then all of the color that we have is a strength of 1, and then anything that's not background, which would normally be bouncing off of our model, is going to be 0. So none of the light is affecting the model. We can go in and move this around, and it's changing the background, but it's not actually changing the lighting on the model. So we can come in, say, make a nice purple background, and there you have it. Let's say you want to merge this with an image background. Pretty simple. Come over to the render settings, go down to film, and then transparent. Now we can render this out as a transparent PNG, and we can composite it in a different program, or we can composite it right here in Blender. So I'll hit F12 to render an image, and there's our spaceship. And you need to do that before you go into compositing, so it's got something to work with. I'm going to switch over to the compositing tab and click on Use Nodes to enable it. Let me spread these two nodes apart so we've got some space to work. I'm going to hold down Control-Shift and click on the render layer to bring up a viewer node. Now I'm going to hold down Shift and right drag over top of these two noodles, and it's going to join them together with a reroute node. What this is going to do is any changes we make in here are automatically going to get piped both to the composite, which is what our final render is going to be saved off of, and the viewer, which is what we can see here in the background. Okay, so we wanted to put this image over a background, so the quickest way to do that is open a folder and drag your image directly into the compositor. That opens the node and then brings the image directly into it. We need to merge these two together, and I'm going to use an alpha over node for that. So Shift A and then search and start typing alpha, and there it is right there. Alpha over. Let's drop it into the pipeline, and as you can see right now, this looks like it's already working backwards. So I'm going to reroute this node down to the bottom image, take our background, put it into the top, and there you have it. Our image is now composited over the top. Now the only problem with this, if I hit the V button a couple times and zoom out, you can see that our background image is actually bigger than our rendered image. So to fix this, we're going to add in a scale node. So Shift A, it's down in Distort and Scale. Drag it into here, and I'm going to change this down to render size. And what that did was it brought our background image down to the render size. I'm going to go with crop so it goes back to the original aspect ratio of the background. And Bob's your uncle, we've got an image ready to render. Okay, so let's hit F12 and give it a render and see what we've got. I'm not happy with this border right here, and I think I'm going to use Future Me to go back into the past to go fix that so that when you guys see the video, it'll be correct all the way through. Okay, I'm back from my time travel, and it looks like it's worked. I guess the last thing we need to do now, I'm going to hit F12 and take a look at the render here. Looks like I'm happy with everything I've got. I'm going to go up here to Image and go to Save As and save it as my final render. Now, over here on the right, I can save a channel of color depth by just going to RGB and hit save as image, and there we go. And now I have my final rendered image. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or any techniques you'd like to add, go ahead and throw them in the comment section below. Have a good night. Cheers.